This is BBC One. And this is BBC Two. And this is Television Centre. And this is David Dunsbury, a commissionaire on the main gate. And this is the main gate. And this is Vision Maintenance. And this is Prese during the strike. And this is the noddy symbol. And this is the symbol of peace and goodwill. And this is a piece of goodwill. And this is Benidorm, where I went on holiday. And this is, what is this?
Well, we're very sorry, that's a rather bad start, isn't it? What we'll do, obviously, is to work on things. The engineers will get things sorted as quickly as they possibly can, and we'll make a good start to the good life. In the meantime, we'll play some music.
Hello, I'm Noah, and this is Nellie, except she can't do the voice. All aboard the podcast! All aboard the podcast!
You know that's not going to mean anything to anybody that's not 50.
Oh, right. Hello, I'm Andrew.
Hello, I'm Lisa.
Welcome to episode 46 of...
Round the Archives.
Which is a What Has the BBC Ever Done For Us special.
It is indeed.
Well, sort of, isn't
Yes.
it? As we look at some of the best of the BBC from lots of contributors.
Yes.
Just a loose end from last time. I said about Sandy Balls.
You did in the Here Come the Double Deckers article.
Yeah, and I claimed it was a golf course. It's actually a holiday village in the New Forest.
I mean, it might have a golf course.
There
but-
might be golf available as a faculty or a facility, but I don't know. So let's start as Warren joins us on the sofa
Yes.
to talk about...
The Great Egg Race.
This is a mighty queer place for an egg race.
Hello and welcome back to The Great Egg Race. And today the three contributors are sat on the sofa and I'm going to ask Warren to help me with a little experiment. Warren, could you hold out your hand please and shut your eyes?
What, my eyes?
Shut your eyes.
Oh, right.
I'm going to put something in your hand and I want you to feel what it is and tell me if you think you know what the thing is. Okay? You ready? Be warned, it's quite hard. Okay, here we go. Put your hand...
What's that? Take it out! Take it out! That's not natural!
You can open your eyes now.
Oh,
What is it?
screwdriver.
It's
you
a
bleeding
screwdriver.
fool.
It's a screwdriver.
Oh, that felt all wrong.
Didn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I've given you a screwdriver
Yes.
because I want to know if you're happy with a tool in your hand. Because I definitely am not.
No, it's very uncomfortable to have one resting in your hand,
Yeah.
especially one as clammy as that one.
But you and me are blokes,
Yes.
apparently. And Lisa, you're a lady.
Yes.
And I've never felt particularly happy doing practical things.
You've not like getting your hands on some tools.
So at school we did woodwork and metalwork and
Yes.
things like that.
What did you make in those?
Virtually nothing.
I made a chicken feeder, and that was about it.
Yeah. I spent most of a year
Chickens didn't eat out. So
just sort of, I don't know what I did. I think I sort of polished me tools and things like that. beyond that, I honestly didn't take anything home. So
No?
Yeah.
No, I'm not practical in any sense whatsoever. So putting anything together from, say, somewhere like IKEA, I'm going to end up with a pile of bolts and a pile of wood in the corner.
So we spent a lovely afternoon watching episodes of The Great Egg Race.
Absolutely.
With the wonderful Professor Heinzwolf, whose middle name is Siegfried, which I think is brilliant.
And appropriate.
Because that ties in with another article later on. But Warren, had you seen any of these?
No, I haven't.
Recently?
No, I haven't seen Egg Race since original broadcast. And then only Egg Race, I've only seen the last season of Egg Race.
Yeah. And did you even know these were available to view on the BBC website?
Not at all. Not at all.
No, and we'll talk about that sort of later on in the sort of wrap-up piece we do. But yeah, there are loads of episodes of The Great Egg Race. Just go to bbc.co.uk archive, and there they are.
Yes.
So, we travel back to January 1979.
Goodness me.
With Brian Cant in his... Well, what's he wearing?
It's a sort of...
light blue safari suit,
suit,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
I was waiting for
yeah.
you almost need a wide brim hat, didn't
Yes.
they?
Yeah. But the idea of The Great Egg Race is to design an eggmobile to transport an egg
Yes.
the furthest distance,
Yes.
powered by one rubber band. Now, later on they talk about the mechanics of this, and there's two ways to use an elastic band. You can either stretch them or you can twist them. And it does remind me of that eternal dilemma. Do you spit or do you swallow? Which is what wine tasters talk about.
She went first. She corpsed first. I'm not being in the edit.
Because when you taste wine,
Yes.
some people argue that if you
Quite a reasonable comment to make, I would
if
say.
you
wouldn't
spit
you?
it out,
It's a
or-
waste of the wine.
yeah,
You go very redly.
or if you swallow it, do you
get-
get more of the aftertaste? And I don't know.
What do you think?
I don't like wine, so I don't
Nah.
really drink it. To be
But-
honest.
So what about gargling them?
It's a whole different ball game. But this is all set up initially through a BBC local radio competition, isn't it?
Happy days.
But the winners can go on to the International Great Egg Race in Toronto.
And they do actually show it in the last episode of that series,
Yeah.
which is also on there.
Yeah.
There's like a 10-minute sequence at the end of the competition,
Yeah.
and it's
oh wow.
fascinating and dull at the same time.
But I think it's fair to describe all the contestants as standard nerds, isn't it?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Because they're all engineers or sciencey, inventory sorts.
But there's two distinctive categories:
Right.
non-facial hair
Yeah.
and facial hair.
Yes.
Because you were asking me about beards, weren't
Yeah,
you?
I asked you: is it compulsory for scientists to have the beards? Being that you're a scientist.
Well, I don't think it's compulsory, but I think what happens is that if you're of a sort of scientific mind, or
You were going to say bent, weren't you?
I was thinking about saying bent and decided not to. If you're of a scientific mind, beards and shaving are so low down on your list of priorities that you sort of end up with a beard by accident. It's not designed.
Okay.
It just sort of arrives in its own time.
So that then brings a question up for lady scientists.
Yeah.
So they don't have beards.
Okay. Well, there's so few
they-
on this show, it's hard to tell.
Right.
There are some ladies later
There are
on.
some ladies, yes, occasionally.
Yes.
Scary
But-
ones.
But they're mostly on presenting duties at this
Yes.
point,
Yes.
aren't they? Because you've got Charlotte Allen, who's the American correspondent, who you said, Warren, reminded you of Connie Booth.
Yeah, she just screamed Connie Booth at me.
Yeah. But
So I said, you see Polly.
she goes off to see the sort of contestants from the local radio stuff. So there's Radio Birmingham, who have got devices like the double yoker and something called albumen, which is an egg who's riding about in one of the things. Because inevitably that they always put sort of twiddly bits on these things,
Yes.
don't they? Eggs with noses and things like that.
And horns and...
Yeah.
My egg has no nose.
There's one made from 2 records of the Brandenburg Concerto, and then we
Is the egg having a movement then?
yeah we rapidly decamp to the Arndale Shopping Centre in Manchester.
Now there's an old term of name, isn't there?
No, we used to have an Arndale Centre in Paul, and you still call it that,
I
don't
still
you?
call the Arndale Centre and get in trouble for it,
Yeah.
yes.
And there's one called the Clucking Egg, apparently. And that one had a big long neck with a bird's head on the top.
Oh, that's right, yeah, some anorexic sort of
But-
goodies goose.
But do you
wasn't
remember
it?
those bird drinking ornament
Oh, yes,
things
yes,
that used to dunk their heads?
Yeah. And then you used to have the wood chopper as well, didn't you? With
Yeah.
caught in the wind windmill.
At one point, there's a baby loose on the course.
Track.
On the what?
It's a track,
Oh, I thought
isn't
it was a
it?
crack. And then you get to see Charlotte's high tech scoreboard.
What were you going to say?
High stack.
High step.
High stack.
Which was nicked from We Are the Champions, isn't
Yeah.
it?
All done in chalk as well, isn't it?
And slightly wonky at certain points.
It's such a BBC Two production, isn't it? We brought that. There's only one channel that this type of programme can be on,
Yeah.
and it's BBC Two. I mean, this is the type of programme that you'd have from its inception, really, as well, isn't it? Really.
You've also got a bloke from Radio Brighton at some point as well, but you don't get to see his entrance, do you?
Yeah, don't see his heat.
No. But Heinz is really the best person for this show, isn't he?
Was at this point he's a judge?
He's
isn't
just a
he?
judge, but he then later comes on to be the presenter as well.
And he's so enthusiastic.
Yeah, I put encouraging because
Yeah.
even if your thing is rubbish,
Yeah.
he will still find something nice to
Yes.
say about it.
Yeah.
He's creating a passion, isn't he?
Yeah.
And that's going through to his audience, from the kids with the Meccano set
Yeah.
to the fully fledged scientists, and he's getting that grey matter going within the audience, and that's good. It's bubbling away.
Because did you ever have Lego as a kid?
I love Lego.
Yeah.
If I have Lego now, I sit there for hours and building things.
Yeah.
Love Lego. Did you have Lego?
Not really. I had a few bits and pieces, but not enough. Not a set. Not enough to make anything big. That was the trouble.
I didn't have Lego. Girls
Yeah.
weren't allowed Lego. No.
Weren't you?
No.
Girls were allowed Lego.
Yeah, but I never got Lego.
Yeah. About all I could ever make was a windmill. That you build a wall and put one of the wheel things in it, and you turn a handle with an elastic band and make things go round.
I had a little motor, and I kept making lift shafts and
Oh,
things.
right. Oh, cool. But yeah, the sort of studio challenge for episode 1 is precision weighing, where they've got to weigh a feather, an egg, and a brick, and they're given like a 50-gram weight, some Bostik and some treacle.
Yeah. And some blue tack.
Blue tacky.
And all sorts of
It
bits
is
of wood
re-
and stuff.
It is real Heath Robinson invention time, isn't it?
Because there's a team from Leicester Poly who you described as the Bee Gees.
They are the Bee Gees. Yes, they are the Bee Gees, with their shirts over with medallions and hairy chests with some kind of wildlife probably being in it.
I do like the fact, and we all picked up on it, that one of the blokes is clearly very unhappy that a lady is talking to him.
That's one of the ones that is
Oh.
doing the egg race.
He was
bit,
very
isn't it?
shy, wasn't
Yeah, it's,
he?
the,
Yeah.
it's the Radio Brighton.
It's the Radio
one.
Brighton man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, girl talking to me, withdrawal.
yeah, and she does touch him at one point.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I expected him to recoil.
Yeah, you can almost think he's obviously telling himself, "Don't move away, don't move away."
Don't
It
react,
would be rude.
Don't react.
And Heinz comes in with a mic on a lead,
Yes.
proper old BBC microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what was it? You said when the post office wins, he goes all Mr. Grace because he says everybody's done jolly well. Yeah. But then we leap forward a couple of years to 1981, where we have to build a gramophone. And there's Hilary Henson on presenting duties, and we did count the number of times there were references made to horns and things like that
Yes,
because
they
of our
did like their
puerile
horns,
minds.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
A typical quote, "That looks remarkably like a horn to me," she says.
Snigger.
But isn't the judge from the London College of Furniture as well?
Yes.
MFI
Yeah.
in brackets.
But yeah, they've got 3.5 hours to make a record player, basically. They get supplied with 78s.
To be fair,
Yeah.
it was all very crap. I could you make out much of the?
Only on the
playback?
last one.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
the last team's one, you could sort of hear it a bit.
Yeah.
The first two were mostly just very scratchy.
Because it all
I think one was creating grooves rather than playing from grooves.
it's all cobbled together from like beer cans and knitting needles, isn't it? Yeah.
Which I made the comment about, which led on to me to believe that if they can make things like that, then Time Monster sequence isn't as daft as it seems.
What with Pertwee's device.
Yeah.
What was your first record player actually like?
It was one of the Woolworths one where you could stack the 45s up on the list and they kept dropping down. But every so often, a great load of them would drop down.
I had a portable pie thing in a big box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, you take the lid off. Yeah,
The lid
exactly
off,
like mine.
yeah.
What colour was yours?
Blue.
Mine was red.
All right. How about you, Lisa?
Well, I didn't actually. My parents had one. A sort of big one in a sort of. I don't think it was wood. It was like plastic.
Oh, sorry.
Dressed up as wood, and I used to listen to Pigs in Space on it.
How does that go?
Pigs in Space.
Very good.
And then I got a little hi-fi thing that had a record player on top, which I listened to Absam Dark on.
Yeah.
Before you remember when we used to do our audio play on our stereo system that we had at our house. Before that, we had a stereogram.
Yeah. All right.
Which massive, great wooden thing.
My gran had she didn't have the innards, but she had the. Well, she didn't have the
How
record
did she
player.
operate then?
Behave. She didn't have the record player bit.
Ladies and gentlemen,
but
I was just dug in the ribs by Lisa's elbow.
But it was full of sort of paperwork and stuff. Big
Your
old
granny
thing.
was full of paperwork.
No, a stereogram was full of
right,
paperwork.
sorry.
But this is all very much the spirit of Wilf Lunn or Heath Robinson, isn't it? As they've got a fluid drive. Yeah,
Yes.
their record player runs on water basically to make the thing go round.
Which I could understand because the story behind them creating it is they're all on a desert island.
Yeah.
So you use the resources around you, use the water, wouldn't you, to power it?
But frankly, all they tend to end up with is 20 seconds of scritchy noises, isn't it? And Rose Cat even got off my lap and went
walked away
because she was so disgusted with it.
Yeah, there was too much scritchiness. Too high pitched.
But yeah, Heinz is still very diplomatic even in
He's
this
very
situation.
sweet.
Very diplomatic.
He's very
that's
sweet,
it, yes.
1984 sees Time for Tea.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. As a BBC tea lady, who it's hard to tell, we weren't sure whether it was Leslie Judd or
I
not.
thought it was Leslie Judd.
It might have been.
She's just got a new job, gone up in the world.
Yeah. Normally, Leslie Judd is outside with a machine made of all different parts that does things to eggs, but yeah, they have to make a tea making machine that runs on ball bearings, and you can tell that somebody's written Heinz the great joke. Let confusion be turned into infusion. And I bet he was up all night practicing that. Yeah. You've got Ian Fells as the guest judge, who you said was like a photocopy of Heinz, wasn't he? 'Cause
Yeah.
he's got the same costume.
Yeah, but it's a different shade.
Yeah. Because
Do you think it's the evil side of Heinz?
well, they put him through a transporter, and Ian Fells came out the other side.
Yeah.
You should have a little beard.
Yeah. But they've both got
We
bow
did have a little
ties.
beard.
He
didn't
did
we?
have a little beard,
Yes.
yes.
There you go.
Oh, I'm
then.
scared now. That opens a whole different raft of possibilities there.
But these devices are very, very sort of in the realms of Wallace and Gromit, aren't
Yes.
they? As like strings are pulled,
But
and,
not as good.
and things go around. Or you suggested it was possibly a mousetrap game because that never
very much
worked.
that, no.
Did it? So we get to see inside a real tea machine, the sort you'd get at work, and I think we were half expecting to see a bloke inside with a kettle, weren't they?
It'd be better tea if that were
yeah, it
happening.
would be, yeah.
And I was reminded of the new traumatic tea machine in the Hitchhiker's Radio series,
Oh, yes.
if you remember that episode.
It doesn't taste, yes.
Where it scans you and then delivers the same liquid no matter what the scan results are.
That's the one, yes.
Which tastes almost entirely unlike tea.
Yes.
And I think that's what they end up with a lot of these. Because Heinz is drinking tea all the way through this episode, isn't he? Yeah, we briefly see Leslie Judd outside with the incredible egg machine, which has got an earth mover.
Ooh.
Deary me. But that's continued next week, and unfortunately the final episode from that season isn't on there, so we never
Probably
know if it
2
works
episodes.
or not. Yeah. Then there were some sexy knees for the ladies,
Oh,
weren't there?
yeah, because they've got night shirts on.
The contestants.
The contestants.
Not Heinz.
But
Yeah, because
You've just
you
put
put
a
that
vision
into
in
your
my
head.
He's got a wee winky candlestick holder in header. Hello,
Yeah.
I'm Heinz Wolf, and welcome to the Great Egg Race, and blows the candle out. There's your titles.
Oh, we should say you said that Ian Fells also reminds you of Richard Stilgo as well.
Yeah.
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 Mutants still go.
But the results, frankly,
are
Would you
awful.
have drunk any of them?
Oh, God.
There's one that just seemed to be milk, didn't it?
Yeah. They were surprisingly upbeat about them, weren't they?
But considering the fact that I don't think it was the contestants' fault, because they couldn't allow the tea bag to remain in the other cup for too long,
Yeah.
because they had a time constraint of about 15 seconds. You can't brew a decent cup of being connoisseurs as we are
Yeah.
of tea within that time.
No.
But yeah,
So
the
it's like
ultimate
that's pee.
the ultimate punishment is they have to drink their own. Yeah.
One of
their
them
tea
drinks
as well.
And their tea as well.
Yeah, one of them drinks it and makes a face.
Yeah.
So he doesn't like tea or just doesn't like that tea.
Jumping ahead to 1986, Back to Nature, with guest judge Cynthia MacArthur.
Who is eccentric, to say the least.
I just
will say is somebody left the door open somewhere.
I just put posh Supergran.
Not even that, no.
By this point, Heinz is riding a really weird bicycle in the title sequence, and which puts a wig on him at one point. I don't know why. He doesn't need one. But they're up in Scotland making breakfast, and they have to make coffee and sugar and bread and butter from raw ingredients,
and get
basically.
milk.
And the raw ingredients have 4 legs, don't they?
They do, yes.
One of the contestants' claims to fame is that he keeps a pet spider. But I suppose you could say that about us, couldn't you? And one of the earlier rounds was to make a machine to lift 3 women as well. That's what all that was about.
All I can see is 3 Bella Embergs in a row.
I think it was the equivalent of 3 women.
Yeah.
So I don't think it actually lifted 3 women, but it could lift the weight equivalent to 3 women.
That's really sexist, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
There's a cow or 2 in the studio,
Yeah.
and a goat.
A goat,
And
yeah.
you spotted a cock as well, didn't you?
There was a cock in the background.
Yeah, they never really did a close up of that.
He just sort of stretched his wings, didn't he?
But this sort of guest Cynthia, she's meant to be sort of all self-sufficient, isn't she? Except, Lisa, you noticed she was wearing jeans.
She's wearing jeans and her boots are certainly not self-sufficient.
Yeah, and I said she certainly didn't find her Levi's in a bush, did she? I like the quote about the cow. There's more going in the front end than is coming out the other end, and I think that was just setting themselves up for a fall, wasn't it?
And I did feel a bit sorry for the cow because I wondered how hard they were pulling on its udders.
Teats?
Teats, yeah.
Teats.
Yeah,
Twist
I'm like,
and pull,
poor
isn't it,
cow,
gently?
it's
Twist
like,
and pull
yeah,
gently.
You're going to hurt it.
They were having much more fun with the goat.
And the goat was nuzzling her a bit because Cynthia MacArthur was holding the goat and it was almost nuzzling into her a little
Yeah.
bit.
They grind their corn between 2 bricks.
A brick and a paving stone. Yeah. So you just get dust.
And by the end of it, Warren was pleased that Heinz had the classic glasses on forehead look.
Yes.
You were waiting for that.
Yes. But we must have to say, he is the coolest man in the world because bow ties are cool.
Indeed.
They are cool, yes.
And I have to ask you, would you dare eat the results?
Heavens no.
Would you even be allowed to give it to the audience these days? Because he
They
passes
fed it to a child.
Yeah. And,
He gives him some bread and says, "What does it taste of?" And he says, "Concrete."
yeah. I like the fact also that Heinz is impressed by the huge baps of the yellow team as well. Sorry, huge buns. Sorry, my mind was elsewhere. He described a soupçon of brick dust in the bread. Yeah.
But the coffee was vaguely okay.
Yeah.
And because they had to produce sugar as well, and obviously you
That was
can't
bizarre, wasn't
you
it?
can't
It's a
refine
syrup,
sugar in that short amount of time, so they sort of get a sort of brown syrupy kind of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, he promises a humdinger of a show next week as well. And I also like the end credits on this one because he's riding his bicycle and watching the end credits. He looks down at them every now and then, and he does a great big grin at the end when the producer credit comes up.
Yeah, and the beauty of this format is that you could do this now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's absolutely a format that is still
Except you can't feed
perfectly
the audience.
valid.
Yeah.
Or probably squeeze the teeth of a goat.
No,
But I think it's really symptomatic of 80s BBC Two, especially.
Yes.
In that you were televising chess games and things like that. That it is very much sort of the nerd channel around sort of 7 o'clock, isn't it?
Also, you have to look at the fact that it is very cheap to make.
Yeah.
So they're creating everything for you, and you're just giving them raw.
Or later on, it
materials.
does become ambitious because we showed you the ones where they're up building igloos.
With the very scary igloo lady.
Yeah, and also filming on an oil rig at the end
Yeah.
as well.
Really?
Yeah, that's
so
the
they have to
final
get
episode.
flown over by helicopter.
Yeah,
And,
so again, you can see the series evolve from start to finish, 79 to 86. They're certainly chucking some money at it by the end.
And by, Heinz, in a very short period of time, becomes a household name, isn't he?
But, so...
What was it you said about his hair?
He's got
the first one.
In the first one, it's very short. It's like his wife has sent him out to get a haircut because he's going to be on the telly. Then slightly later on in that episode, I don't know if it's a little bit static or if he's just been playing with it too much. It's sticking up a little bit, isn't
like
it?
a pure mad professor.
I think that's just excitement building, isn't it? Yeah.
So,
And he has half rims. I love half rims. They're fantastic.
but yeah, he's got the sort of voice that you can just listen to as well. It's very soothing and very,
He is very
informative.
He could go through. It's like listening at night to a radio program that's going to send you to sleep. But he could be reading a technical manual. He would just find it entertaining and just soothing as you go off to sleep.
Yeah. But so Great Egg Race. Multiple episodes available for free.
Yes.
So go and seek them out. That's all I can say.
Yes.
And we'll be back again later.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Good night.
Many thanks for Warren for joining us.
Yes, indeed.
And I think he enjoyed
I think he did.
a load of Great Egg Races.
Yes, he was very alarmed by your
by my tool.
Yes.
Well, that was the effect I was hoping to have.
Yes.
Right, Warren will be back later for a general chat about the BBC at the end. But let's move on to the next piece. There's Simon and Ken from the Exton Moss Experiment. Join us to look at
The Vicar of Dibley.
The Exton Moss Experiment. Adventures in Wine and Space with Simon Exton and Ken Moss.
Hello everyone and a warm welcome to the Exton Moss Experiment. I'm Ken Moss.
I'm Simon Exton.
And we are once again invading round the archives with our ramblings. Today we're going to look at an episode of The Vicar of Dibley from the first series. Simon and I are on a mini recording session. We'd had this planned for quite a while and we'd already picked what we were going to watch and what little things we wanted to do. As it happens, I am a big fan of The Archers. And yesterday, one of the longest serving cast members, Edward Kelsey, died. He played Joe Grundy since the mid-80s. And he happens to be in an episode of The Vicar of Dibley. So it's slightly changed what we're going to watch, but not very much. So we will get onto that shortly. For those of you not familiar with The Vicar of Dibley, it was a comedy series with Dawn French from the 1990s, centring around a female vicar in the fictional parish of Dibley, and all the concomitant hilarity that goes with having a female member of the clergy in the 1990s. It was quite good.
It's one of those that I would dip in and out of if it was on. I always enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it enough to make a real special effort to watch it every time. I always liked Dawn French's portrayal in it. The Middle England attitude, how dare they send us a female vicar, always wound me up a little bit. And I know that it's supposed to be sending up that attitude, but that the prevalence of that attitude in some of the characters, I just found grating.
Having witnessed it firsthand in
your role as a female vicar?
No, in Bamber Bridge, I was sort of a peripheral member of a church. I was involved with various activities at a church, and they replaced an old stalwart minister with a lesbian. And immediately, all this love and tolerance and all being God's creatures vanished out of the window, and half of the congregation abandoned the church in outrage at this lesbian minister.
I'm afraid my attitude would be well off you.
No.
It wasn't.
Don't let the door smack you in the ass on the way out.
It spoke to me far more about the people that left than the people that stayed behind.
See, I wasn't raised as a Christian, so this whole invisible friend thing kind of leaves me cold.
I long since lapsed. I was raised a Catholic for what it's worth, and I'd already made the decision by about 7 or 8 that it was. They were a lovely set of stories, but they're not for me. And particularly with recent events in Sri Lanka have just reaffirmed that killing each other to prove how peaceful your imaginary friend is not my sort of thing. So me and religion have never really got on terribly well. But that said, this is about the Vicar of Dibley, and I did quite like it. But again, it's from the same stable as Four Weddings and a Funeral and the British rom-coms that we've had over the years. They're all from the Curtis, Elton, Atkinson stable, and I do quite like them. So we will get onto that. The episode we're going to watch today is called The Window and the Weather, and it's one of my favourites, actually. We'll get onto that in a sec. But first of all, tonic screwdrivers at the ready. It's time for our gin review. Today is another one of Simon's samplers, and what have we got for today?
Today we have Porter's Tropical Old Tom Gin, which is apparently, according to the little card that they send out, a classical juniper base. I thought all gins had a juniper base, but a classical juniper base is lifted by tropical notes of passion fruit, guava and white tea. Juicy tropical fruit notes are present, floral honey, earthy juniper and little warming citrus spice brings depth underneath. Apparently, they think it's a well-balanced, sophisticated gin with a hint of juicy freshness. Is that what you think?
It's a somewhat floral description for a nice gin. I like it. It's not what I was expecting.
You were expecting another gin ting. I was kind of expecting another gin ting from that description. It isn't.
I hear the word tropical and I instantly think mango and passion fruit and pineapple. I like it, and it's one that I would happily go back to again and again. Is it a 5? It's coasting very close to 5 territory. I'm going to have to give it a high 4.
We don't do half marks. You can't have half a Bernard.
No. It'll have to have 4 Bernards. Yes, but they're a good 4 Bernards.
Yeah, okay. I think it's bland. I think that there's so little that's positive in here it'd be impossible to actively dislike.
The Series 11 of gins. That's what you said about Doctor Who Series 11.
Yeah, but
it's not positive enough to hate.
But then I rewatched Rosa and realised I was very, very wrong about that. See what this podcast has done? It made me rewatch Rosa.
Yes. See episode...
It wasn't as traumatic as rewatching Threads, but...
For those of you who are interested, episode 14 of our podcast looks at Series 11 of Doctor Who. It's not overwhelmingly positive, but we do it in a constructive way. But back to the gin.
Back to the gin, 2.
2?
Yeah.
Goodness me. Right.
I'm not particularly impressed at all.
You see, I like these sort of different gins. At least
I don't think this is different. I think this is bland. It tastes like straight off the shelf run-of-the-mill gin. The whole tropical notes and white tea and all this. Don't get any of it.
Well, I don't think that it's quite as exciting as the card would make out. But
and it's not as bad as the last tea-based gin we tried.
I must have mentioned this about 12 times now, but for anybody out there who's thinking about buying Mason's Yorkshire Gin, the tea edition, it's nowhere near as lovely and English as it sounds. It's awful. It's the only...
Supermarket own brand is better.
By a long way. But yes, by a long way. That was a chore to drink. But no, I would go back to this, but... gosh, 4 and 2, that's quite a split for us, that.
I've no problem drinking it because there's nothing sufficiently positive to dislike.
Oh,
but I wouldn't willingly go for it again.
So Porter's Tropical Gin. A very mixed review. Moving on.
Our next regular segment is the Black Archive.
This is where we go down into the basement underneath Maverick Studios and we pull out a lost bit of television that I am hoarding in my private collection and we release it back into public domain. What have you got for today?
Oh, I'm going first.
You're going first.
Right, okay. I would like to bring back I was thinking about this, and since we're doing a comedy programme, I'd like to bring back a lost comedy programme. And the one I'd like to bring back is a Terry Scott vehicle called The Gnomes of Dulwich.
Right, you've got me on this. What was that?
None of it survives. It was a 6-episode comedy from the late 60s, with Terry Scott and a number of other people playing garden gnomes. It was apparently very, very entertaining, and I think that would just be fun to watch.
Right. Well, I, on the other hand, I'm going to go down a bit of a different route. It's an episode of something I'm not even sure that actually exists. The documentation is there. It's a children's programme from the 1980s, Button Moon. And the very last episode, which was all sort of scripted and ready to go, I believe, and there are production notes for it, it's called Goodbye Button Moon, the very last episode, which it was certainly never transmitted. It's whether it was actually made. And it all sort of brought it to a close. It's one that I don't actually know anything about, but I would be interested to see.
I never really saw Button Moon. It was quite a bit after my
Yeah.
time, and there are some kiddie stuff that I looked at as an adult and really enjoyed. So we talked about the Trapdoor.
Yeah,
I love the Trapdoor.
Trapdoor was great, yes.
Button Moon was just a little bit too kiddie-fied for me.
Well, by the time Button Moon came along, you would have been, 13? So yeah, a little bit outside your viewing schedules at the time. I grew up with it. I was 3 or 4 when it started, and by the time it finished, my sister was watching it. She was a bit younger than I am, so I've got very fond memories of Button Moon. The theme tune, of course, sung by Peter Davison and Sandra Dickinson. It's fluff and it's silly, but I've got very fond memories on it. So
It's nice. You're not going to make me watch an episode of it at some point?
yes, I am. There's somewhere in the archive there is a DVD with Button Moon on it.
I've already sat through Thomas the Tank Engine, which was awful.
Yeah, it was not awful. Thomas the Tank Engine, particularly the very early ones when it was done at Shepperton, were wonderful. But you had to grow up with them, I think.
The one that you chose, it was a bit Edgar Allan Poe because they bricked him up behind a wall, but still kept his head poking, his eyes poking out so we could see what was going on. But I thought that was a bit extreme for kiddies' telly, to be honest.
They warmed him up. Yeah.
So he could see his friends going past.
All good, clean family fun. Walling up alive. I suppose when you put it that way. Shall we crack on? Shall we get closer to God?
Our full reaction to the joys of Thomas the Tank Engine will be on our Kids TV episode.
Which may already be out by the time this goes out.
And when it comes out, it will have a surprise guest slot from none other than Round the Archives.
It will. Who have done us a splendid piece on Pipkins.
They have. It's fantastic.
So we'll look
kind of
forward
puts
to
ours to shame.
It does, really.
That was towards the end of an evening after quite a bit of gin.
And Andy and Lisa are far more structured about things than we are. We just sort of ramble with gin.
Sober as well.
So
they do a gin review on it as well.
They have, yes. You've got
especially for us, they brought gin in.
Once again, we are segueing. Shall we play the tape and let's see what we've got? So this is Vicar of Dibley from 1990. It'll be mid-90s, 94, I think. And it's called The Window and the Weather. Okay, so that was The Window and the Weather from the first series of The Vicar of Dibley in 1994. I have seen this first series, certainly at the time, quite a few times. What did you think?
I really quite enjoyed that. There weren't a massive number of real laugh-out-loud moments, but there were a few.
Yeah.
I realised that I'm remembering it a little unfairly, because this was, looking at this, the 4th episode of the first series.
Yeah.
My recollection was that an awful lot of the humour was directed about the fact that there's a woman vicar and people in the village not coping with that terribly well. But actually, by the 4th episode, they've accepted completely the fact that she's a woman.
From memory, I think it's only in this first series, it only plays a part. It's certainly a major factor in the very first episode. And it's sort of a driving point for the plot in the last episode of this series. Beyond that, it's never really, really cropped up again.
I'm remembering it unfairly. Yeah, there are a couple of laugh-out-loud bits. Nice bit towards the end where she gets one over on the financial blokey.
Yeah, the one thing that's leapt out at me at this is it's actually very well written. And again, Richard Curtis, who was I think he wrote most of them, if not all of them.
What we haven't done is describe the plot.
I suppose it would help viewers who haven't seen. Yes, it's, as I said, it's set in the little English village of St Barnabas, and one night they have a colossal storm. Yeah, the parish of St Barnabas, the vicar, yeah. The gin's kicking in, this lovely gin that you don't like. Of Dibley, yes, it rips through Dibley, this storm, and a tree gets blown through the window of the church. Most of the episodes open with a parish council meeting in the church itself, and this is no different. So they all end up sat around discussing how they're going to raise the £11,000 they need to replace the window. Cue much hilarity. They have a raffle where they go around the village selling raffle tickets for £5 for raffle prizes that don't actually exist.
That bit was really quite funny.
And that was where Edward Kelsey pops up. Yeah. Joe Grundy's there in his garden. Before the vicar rings round one of the rich parishioners' rich friends and fleeces him in quite a convivial way out of a further £10,000, and they replace the window. In the meantime, it's on the news that there's been earthquakes in Colombia, and all these school children and families have been left homeless. So they replace the stained glass window with just a plain glass window that gives them a lovely view of the sunset, and they donate the rest of the money to the orphan appeal. And it's all very, very English, and it's very homely, and it's just comfort viewing. There's nothing offensive about it as such. But again, another thing that leapt out was that a large number of the cast are dead.
Well,
I know you've pointed out that they
are generally weren't spring chickens in this, and this is 25 years ago.
Roger Lloyd Pack, I mean, he died quite young. Emma Chambers, who was only 53 when she died, plays Alice the Verger. And a couple of the other ones, yes, fair dues, they were well into their 80s, if not 90s. And Trevor Peacock, who is still alive, but he was diagnosed with dementia about 10 years ago. He's in his late 80s. But I haven't seen these for years, so it's just a bit of a shock watching when they were still all alive, and now watching it again, and they're not. So, the perils of digging into the archives, unfortunately. So that was The Vicar of Dibley. I would recommend, to anybody that's not ever watched any, it's worth your time. If you like the whole Four Weddings and a Funeral style of comedy and British rom-coms and sitcoms, I think this will appeal to you. It's all very homely stuff.
It's entertaining. It is what it is. You know what you're going to get when you go in for it. It's not a Fawlty Towers or a Dad's Army, but it does the job.
It does the job. Yeah, that's our bottom line. It does the job.
Yeah.
And with that, we shall sign off and pass you back into the capable hands of Andy and Lisa for the rest of their podcast. We'll be invading at some other point, I'm sure, with our meaningful ramblings and a gin review or two. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Goodbye now.
Once again, thank you to Simon and Ken.
Yes, indeed.
And I understand they've got lots of other material in the bank.
Yes.
So we've definitely not heard the last of them.
No, they've been busy boys.
Yes, but as always, check out their podcast, which is still going strong.
It is.
Great fun it is too.
It is.
Right, next, a little bit of a change. As two contributors who have never worked together before join forces.
They do.
As Andy and Martin
yes
team up to do a big piece.
Yes, indeed.
On
All Creatures Great and Small.
Hello, Martin.
Hello, Andy.
Hello. How are you this fine day?
Well, it's a bit foggy here, but then again, that's quite appropriate.
It is, for the subject matter of what we're focusing on today, yeah.
We are going to be watching, or talking about what we have been watching, which is All Creatures Great and Small. And it's the last episode of the third series, and it's called Big Steps and Little Uns, which was written and directed by one Terence Dudley.
God, lots of information there, straight off. Are you on Wikipedia?
No, I wrote it down in my book.
I wrote it all down!
5th of April, 1980.
Oh, I think we should do it all in Yorkshire.
Yes, just like Tristan did.
Indeed. So, can I just have a bit of a chat about Terence Dudley before we get into the episode?
You may.
So, I've always been quite a Terence Dudley fan, which is kind of against the grain, or against received wisdom, particularly about Survivors, which he produced. I kind of liked the fact in Series 2 that it got away from people in Land Rovers with guns. Yeah, because I just think it was repetitive after a while. So I kind of liked Series 2 and the idyllic sort of trying to go back to nature stuff. I mean, Series 3 went off the rails, but but
you do get blessed, don't you? You do get blessed in Series 3.
You do. But I just think it's really interesting, this situation that they had in the early 80s, that Terence Dudley and all these other All Creatures writers were suddenly transferred onto Doctor Who because of the common factor being John Nathan Turner.
Indeed.
And just how they were perhaps wonderful at writing for All Creatures Great and Small, but perhaps not so good for writing for Doctor Who.
Well, yeah,
discuss.
I mean, they are chalk and cheese, really, aren't they? I mean, that's kind of the problem. I mean, you've got the same with Peter Moffat. You know, he was very good at what he did, but it didn't quite fit with action, adventure, and effects stuff and everything like that. You know, I mean, I suppose one of the plus things is that at least he never sort of got his son to be on Doctor Who, which is
indeed. I know. Poor old Stephen, bless his heart.
The ubiquitous Stephen Dudley.
He had quite a lot to do, didn't he? I was quite surprised. Yeah,
he's a bit older. I mean, if you've seen him as a child as a scary-looking child in Doomwatch, so he actually seems to have grown up in front of the cameras, and it was almost like whenever they needed a kid to play anybody.
He was drafted in.
Oh, my son is available. Do we know what happened to him? Do we know?
I do. I've met him, in fact.
Oh, right.
I met him in 2003 when I did the Survivor Studio Day. I invited him for one of them. I don't remember which one it was. It was the second series, I think. We interviewed him on camera. And he's a big chap now. Wow. Looked just like his dad. And but the weirdest thing, which I will share, because I don't think it's a secret, is he came in and he was like, "Oh, I must tell you, Andy, straight away, the first thing, the most important thing is that my father's archive has all been burnt to the ground. It's all been destroyed, so you can't have anything." So it was really weird. And it was such an obvious lie.
They mustn't play with matches, these children.
It was very strange, because he knew I was writing the Survivors book by then, and I think this was just a way of stopping me from getting at any of the juice.
Right.
With this big lie, but there you go.
No, that's interesting.
Terence Dudley's archive, which I believe still exists in
it is kind of weird. So he presumably didn't grow up to be an adult actor, or did he?
No, I don't think so. No.
It was just like, "You're here, son, be in my film."
Yeah. Get in shot, lad.
Aye. Talk about Thors.
He shouldn't hit animals. It's beastly.
Quite right. This is the Colonel's son, home from school for the holidays. This is Mr. Farnan.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do? Simon, is it?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Farnan is your father's vet.
Yes, I know. He saved Jasper's life last year.
Jasper? Oh, yes, I remember.
Mr. Greer said he should be put down. But you saved him.
Another Survivors crossover, can I just quickly talk about?
Indeed.
Is the fact I cheered when one of the problems with was it a cow or a horse? I don't remember. It was brucellosis, which it rears its ugly head in Survivors. And I'm aware of 2 animal diseases only in my life. They are brucellosis and clover bloat. And whenever I watch All Creatures Great and Small, I always shout. I'm always whittering on, saying it's going to be clover bloat or it's going to be brucellosis. So when it was brucellosis, I was like, "Yay!" Anyway,
but no flopbot.
No flopbot. No, that's Tricky Woo, isn't it?
Indeed. Unfortunately, it doesn't feature in the episode we're talking about.
I know. Anyway, tell me, what were your impressions of this episode?
My impressions? Well,
initially though, because you watched it back in the day, didn't you?
I did watch it back in the day. I also watched. I was a bit of my sister was a fan of the books, and my sister is a big, indeed is a big fan of animals. So it was kind of we watched it on Sunday evenings for many years. And I even watched. I think they did some evening repeats a few years later. I think I must have been about the age of the Falklands the Falklands. When the repeats were on, it must have been around that time. So actually, this whole idea of going off to war and everything was actually resonating. I mean, they were made a couple of years before that, but I think there was repeats 2 or 3 years later. And funnily enough, the episode I thought this was isn't the one it is. There's one, I think, in the episode where war is declared, which is set a few months earlier, and Siegfried and James go up a hill to overlook, and I think literally war was either being declared that morning and they were all just on this hill and they were talking about what was to become of everything and everything like that. And I just found that a terribly moving scene. And then so when I was saying there's a really moving episode, it really got me, it turns out it was this one. It wasn't this one, I should say.
It wasn't this one.
But interestingly
it wasn't the one you made me watch.
but weirdly, I did find this one moving in different ways. Really, I've never been very good at farewells.
Okay.
I mean, some people can, but I've always found them very difficult. I used to sort of, the old wobbly lip, the old wobbly lip, and and so it was kind of because there was this growing sense of imminent, going off to war and departures and everything like that. It actually it has some very big scenes in it. From that point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other reasons why that's even more moving when you sort of look into it. But I mean, jumping ahead, you get the scene where Siegfried is being terribly stoic.
Yes.
And because everyone knows he's going in the morning, but doesn't want to see anybody and everything like that. And then of course, dear old Carol. Let's not dwell.
You couldn't explain why we're not going to dwell on Carol.
Well,
you can't just say that.
It's well, basically, it's not her finest hour. This episode.
It really isn't.
And
honestly, all my notes were about her.
Yeah,
anyway,
they don't paint her in the greatest light. So actually, the actual sympathy that you're supposed to be feeling,
you don't, because she's a total cow in this episode.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Which I'd forgotten. I mean, okay, you could argue that's clever script writing and people say all sorts of weird things when they're in stressful situations, blah 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 blah. But I think she's written as a very negative character in this one.
Yeah.
Especially as over the course of the 3 years you've had this story arc of them meeting and all this kind of thing and building a family and living up in the cupboard in the attic or whatever it was they were. Or were they the borrowers? No, but they were sort of upstairs in the room, and it was all terribly trying to get their own house and all this kind of thing. And it just in this sort of, you actually think, because there's all this stuff about him going off to war, and he doesn't really have to because it's a reserved occupation.
Yes,
like
indeed.
That. And you kind of, at the end of it, you're thinking, I bet he's just glad to be off.
Germany invades Poland, so we declare war on Germany. Then a Pole comes here to be a vet, which is a reserved occupation, while you volunteer to go and fight his war for him. That's highly imaginative, that is.
Well, it's not only his war, my dear, is it really? You see, this mendacious maniac simply can't be allowed to wander wherever the mood takes him. He's got to be stopped. His aim's world conquest, the death of democracy.
Should we just do a synopsis of the episode so that if people haven't seen it? So, shall I start? And you can fill in the bits that I don't say. So okay. James and Siegfried are about to join the RAF, yeah?
Yes.
And
separately. Separately. They're not running off together.
And the practice is visited by a Polish vet, a female Polish vet called Dr. Rodzinska.
Indeed.
Who's trying to decide whether she's going to go and stay with the practice after she's checked it out. And there's also lots of animal illness going on, some involving Stephen Dudley, some not. Was that a good enough synopsis? What?
That pretty much covers it. Yeah. I'll shut my book now. I mean, the interesting thing to me about the episode is you've got these three stories, one of which is the going off to war, but you've got the story of the dog, and you've got the story of the horse. And the fascinating thing to me is the dog situation, right? I mean, it comes right at the end, and he's going to go the full Dr. Chinnery, isn't he?
Totally. It's amazing it doesn't die.
What have you got there, then?
It's Blacko, the poorly one, the one I won't putting down, you know.
And this one, the sleeping one. By the fire?
Whiskey? My little angel, she is. My little princess.
Yeah, it's like they've got it there. It's in the basket, and you think, oh,
what's going to fall on it?
Mark Gatiss is going to come in with a massive syringe with a booster jab in the and of course that isn't what happens. Which, again, I'm spoiling the end here, but never.
No, but when it does happen, it's so weird, isn't it? So basically, this dog is the last thing that James Herriot is going to do his magic on before he goes away, and it is a sort of miracle magic moment that's over in a second. I was like, what just happened? And is it a dislocated shoulder?
All that learning, veterinary. That's what it.
And there's a little click or whatever, and suddenly the dog's fine and bounding around.
This needs a general anaesthetic. And 2 of us.
I can help.
No, darling, it would have to be Tris. I'll never get the poor dog in a car like this.
Then Tristan will have to come up here.
To be fair, there's no phone. I've never done it before. It's all textbook stuff. Now, you lift the radius slowly up until the anconius is clear. All right, old boy, it's all right. Then you rotate the radius and the ulna inwards.
James.
Hey, you've mentored him. It looks like it, Mr. Somerville, yes.
That's grand, isn't it, old lad, eh?
I suppose if we go right back to the beginning, though.
Do that, Martin. Do that. Can you bring some sort of order to this chaos?
Well, I just really wanted to give a quick nod because I love the theme music.
Yes.
It really it triggers something with me. Johnny Pearson at his best.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And what always fascinates me about the later series is how the title sequence, they mimic it. So they use the cars on the same roads, different cars. They do the ha 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 ha, aren't we laughing in the car? Which is slightly worrying. It's like, oh gosh, what happened? There wasn't a war, and we just sat in a different car, but we found the same joke really funny. In exactly the same thing, and they go over the same little bridge, and it's all structured, so it's identical but not. There's a lot of people online who believe that the 3 series before the war are far superior to the ones afterwards.
I'm sure,
and they may have a point. Tracking down the Christmas specials on the box set is a nightmare. I found out.
I was wondering about that because I was thinking I might watch those, but that box set is awful. There's no information on any of it as to what to put in. Anyway, yeah. So another plot thread is Tristan qualifying finally as a vet.
Indeed, after the 3 years.
Tristan Farnan, MRCVS.
Never.
Don't take my word for it.
Now I know we shall win the war.
What?
The age of miracles is not past. Well done, little brother. Jolly well done.
Do you think we might drop the little in future?
I'll give it a try. Well, this calls for a mammoth celebration tomorrow night. We'll talk about it when I get back.
Now, the other thing that gets me about Tristan is because whenever he comes down the stairs, he stands right next to that grandfather clock.
Yeah.
And I always just think, what you need is someone to for some reason. I always need that. I need that to happen.
What I hadn't realised, because to share with the listeners, that I was rewatching Series 1 before you kind of accelerated me to the end of Series 3.
Yeah, just to spoil it for you. I'm the spoiler.
Spoil it all for me.
So I only ever do opening episodes, and here I am doing the last one.
I didn't realise how much of All Creatures Great and Small hinged on eavesdropping in the door of the vet's office and listening to people on the phone. It's just all the time. I mean, it's just constant.
Yes. Well, again, of course, when you start to think about it, all the way these things are structured, you start to realise you've got this whole it's this pre-mobile phone thing.
Yes,
how plots can't work the same way anymore.
No.
We were watching a few weeks ago The Fugitive, the Harrison Ford film.
Yeah.
And there's a whole scene where he escapes down the back stairs, and you've got Tommy Lee Jones at the top of the stairs, and you think all he needs to do is ring his. Oh, he can't do that. They'd lose 20 minutes of the film. We'd be caught in 5 minutes.
Well, I think you'd lose all of the antics of All Creatures Great and Small, all of it, because it's
there's a lot of incredible eye rolling. This is the thing, and people pretending they're not there.
Yes, constantly. It reminded me more of Neighbours than anything else, or another. It's another shitty Australian soap. Yeah.
Well, I was very addicted to Neighbours when I was first unemployed back in the day.
Oh well, so was I. I think everyone was. That was allowed.
Well, I was watching it twice a day. It was terrible.
So anyway, can we talk about Dr. Rajinska? I feel you have things to say.
Well, the interesting thing that gets me about I'll quickly go through my notes. Is this? It's this sense that they know they know a vet is coming.
Yeah.
And it's this whole woman. It's Roger Moore. Woman. You know.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's just crikey, she's a woman, and immediately you get the sour. And it's interesting that Mrs. Hall is kind of sort of involved in this. You know, they don't want another woman around the place. You know,
no.
Which when you've got Mrs. Hall and the whole Ted Moult thing going on anyway, she doesn't want to really get married. She doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to leave the people she's looking after. She feels needed and necessary here.
But she doesn't want anything. Honestly, Mrs. Hall is a dreadful old bag, isn't she? Honestly, there's nothing lovable about her, unless you disagree.
There are moments, I think, throughout the series where she shines. I mean, do you know the story of why she's not in any after this episode?
Yes, I know. This was kind of her last acting appearance, and she died a few months later. Yeah,
and in quite horrible circumstances.
Oh, really? No, I don't know that.
I think she went for a double hip replacement and didn't survive the surgery. It was kind of. And I think somebody there was a lot of people who'd said, "Oh no, have the surgery, you'll be fine."
Shit. You know?
So it is actually
she
quite...
really struggles to amble around this episode, doesn't she?
That's right, yeah, and of course there's this whole this thing. I think in the first of the Christmas specials, they have the picture in the frame, you know, to this is our tribute to, and obviously then they go through various non-replacements for a while, but she is quite a solid, you know, part of the quintet. You know, of the main characters in many ways. She's sort of there as, I mean, I keep going on now whenever I'm writing about anything. I think you have the audience identify the chorus, if you like, and she very much is the reaction.
Yes,
the reaction character. But they again, when her and Ellen are having a go at dear old Dr. Rajinski, they're just thick as thieves and twice as horrible.
I know.
You know.
Yes.
And of course, when they get the phone call when she says that she's not coming, it's like they might as well have done cartwheels round the room.
Yes, exactly. Putting the flags out. It's like, good. We don't want another woman around here. We can get rid of them all.
Yeah, but of course, the interesting thing about that is when you think about it, Second World War, all the blokes were buggering off. You know? And you would kind of think. You know, so you can have a really hard time in Yorkshire, lass.
Yeah.
If all the blokes go off to war, there'll be the old guys, obviously young Stephen Dudley, and that's about it. Yeah.
And then you've got the woman saying she's not even likeable because when she's asked whether she has milk and sugar, she says cream without sugar. I mean, who asks for cream?
Damn it.
She wouldn't ask for cream. I was with Helen on that one. She's asking for cream.
Don't you know there's a war on?
I remember I was interviewing a trainee library staff member many years ago, and I asked whether they wanted a drink as part of before we went for a tour of the facility. And I remember this kid, I always remember, he said, "Oh, could I have a hot chocolate?" And I was thinking, well, you've not got the job. Immediately. And it was reminded of that. Cream, please. Sod off. Anyway.
The other fascinating thing, although you might find, is how terribly, oh dear God, it's a woman, the blokes are as well.
Yes, they just can't get over it, can they?
Basically, Tris is anything with a pulse, quite frankly.
He really is, but that's awful, isn't it, in a way? Because therefore, back in the day, you think, oh, he's Jack the Lad, and that's okay, you pat him on the back, go on, my son. But now it just feels really lechy and not okay. It just feels grim.
And when they're reading all the qualifications, it's just like, she's got this and she can do that, and my God, you know, but she's only a woman.
Yes.
You know.
Only
and then, of course, Siegfried does his wonderful thinking it himself and then accusing everybody else of it later.
Yes, exactly.
Which, of course, is just part of his wonderful character.
I did think it was a shame that she didn't get to do any vetting when she was
No.
up there? Because
No,
I think
they
James
had-
talked about it, didn't he? That she was good, but
She went off on the rounds with them, but
Yeah.
they didn't. And of course, when you think about the first series and how he is introduced to all the farmers, and they all think
Yeah.
he's some lanky streak of nothing, that would have been an interesting thing. You know,
course
I mean,
it
there
would,
was
yeah.
that line about her stripped to the waist with her hand up a cow or something.
Yes.
Which was again, you know, just. You know,
I know, yeah.
Which is kind of disturbing in its own.
I was briefly transported to a distant future in the 90s when I used to be in love with Suzanne Burden, who played the vet in the 90s. I think it was just called The Vet. Did you ever see that drama series?
Don't remember it, but
yeah.
that doesn't mean. I
It was
mean, it might have been the era when I went out for the evening, you know.
It were a female vet in Yorkshire.
Right.
Actually, I don't know whether it was, but anyway,
No,
Suzanne
no.
Burden.
But it needs to be written if
Come
it
on.
wasn't.
Yeah, because they didn't have any female vets in bloody All Creatures Great and Small.
No.
Cheeky bastards. What else have we not talked? We haven't talked about the post office mistress. We must talk about her.
Well, I mean, again, now we've got Mr. Is it Summergill?
That's it. Yeah.
The man on a bike who doesn't like telephones, but has a lovely beret.
Yeah, he does.
If we were doing
Fond of
Dress
a beret,
if we were
no
doing Dress for
phone.
Success, that beret would be in there. I tell you, that beret has a starring role all on its own.
Yeah.
But Charles West.
Yeah, we had to rewind the bit where he talks about why he didn't tell the postmistress what was wrong with the cow.
Because it aborted, and it's a rude word.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't talk about that in front of a woman.
But doesn't he also call her not frigid? He calls her something like that, doesn't he?
I can't remember the exact word, but it's. I think she has this. I think basically she sits on that phone all day, every day, listening to everybody's little peccadillos. She knows everything about the world, and
she's definitely in the right place, isn't she? I think she has a high old life there, up on the hill.
Mr. Herriot, it's Miss Thompson here, postmistress at Hainby.
Yes, Miss Thompson.
I've got Mr. Somergill here. Mr. Somergill from up at West Top.
Yes?
It's his cow.
What's wrong with her?
I told you, he says, what's wrong with her?
Tell him to come.
He says, tell you to come.
But let me talk to him.
He won't use the phone. He's too frightened of it.
I'm not afeard on it. I don't hold with a damn thing.
What's that?
He says he doesn't haul with a thing.
What's the snow like up there?
Well, he's got here on his bike.
Tell him I'll come as soon as I can.
All right, goodbye. Says he'll come as soon as he can.
Oh, aye.
Just a minute. I'll be tuppence if you don't mind.
oh, absolutely. And of course, the other thing about that is, again, it's this whole world before telephones. You know, it really does sort of beg a belief how anything got done. Really, you know.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, you look at those cars they're driving around.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that one where he's trying to get the car out of that farmyard, and you just think he needs a 4-wheel drive.
Yes. I was just going to announce my candidate in the best quote of the episode competition, which was Siegfried talking about Hitler. That monstrous Middle European miscreant marching all over the Medoc.
Ah, yes. The mendacious maniac I got down here as well, yes. He was alliterating like hell in that scene.
He really was. Or at least Terence Dudley was, one of the two.
Yes. And making all sorts of allusions to the war will be all right as long as we've got claret.
Yes. He couldn't be more upper middle class, could he?
Oh, but he is fabulous. There's a lovely bit where they start going about you might not come back, and he just a wonderful eye roll.
Yes,
it's just and there are moments as well when you can see him really auditioning for his Churchill.
Yeah, totally.
You can just see it. There are moments where you think he wants to be Churchill in something. You know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think he's the star of the episode, if not the entire thing. The entire series.
It isn't. Yes, I mean, wasn't it actually? I mean, he was cast first, wasn't he? I mean, it was. I don't know whether it was supposed to be a vehicle for him, because obviously, you know, it's all really about young Veterinary. But sorry,
no, I don't apologise. I like.
No,
it
I really
every
must
time
stop
you
doing
do
that. Funny voices. That's what we need. Yeah.
But originally it was Anthony Hopkins in the All Creatures Great and Small film, wasn't it?
Indeed, yeah. And Simon West, yeah.
Or was it Simon Ward?
Oh, Simon Ward, sorry, not Simon West. Yeah. See, you got that bit out as well. I didn't write that down. It's the wrong thing. I've not got the notes for that one.
But the best Siegfried scene is, and you're talking earlier about how he couldn't say goodbye, but it's the scene where he pretends to fall asleep so he doesn't have to say goodbye to James, and James leaves and has a little chat with Mrs. Hall, and she says, "Don't worry, I'll wake him when he needs to go." And as soon as the door closes, he opens his eyes and gets another drink, and you realise, oh, poor chap, we've seen the makeup of this man, that he just can't bring himself to say goodbye.
You know, it's always jolly and the I think they do that a lot with Siegfried though. He doesn't play the the negative stuff. He can't deal with the bad stuff really. Yeah. But it's a great character, and again that scene is a masterclass. It really is a masterclass. But equally, it's just very cleverly balanced. And of course the whole thing about their friendship having come together, over this 3 years, and how how he's sort of become part of the practice and everything like that, and they've built the one that he does about having built something here.
Yes.
That James does about having, it is actually strangely moving.
Yeah, and it is a sort of love letter to Yorkshire as well, isn't it? There's that moment when James gets to say he has a real feeling of belonging, and about the people, they're blunt and down to earth, but he says he really loves them.
Look, I don't know about you, but I think we've made a mark here. Made a home. There's a real feeling of belonging. You see, we're both foreigners here, really, but we've been accepted by the people. They're not demonstrative. They're blunt, down-to-earth, no-nonsense folk, and I love them. I really love them. I don't suppose we'll ever be rich. Don't want to be much. I just know that I couldn't be happier than I am now. Doing a worthwhile job among people I love in this wonderful country. That's why it's worth fighting for. And that's why we're going to win this war.
As an end, as a final episode that's sort of closing off a 3-year series, it's actually beautifully crafted in that way. Yeah. Apart from some of the other stuff that tends to throw it a bit off kilter.
The weird stuff, yeah. So, did you know who he waved to? Because I know about the trivia behind the scenes about who he waved to. Do you know
I read something about the owners of the house or something, wasn't it?
Yes, Olive and Charles Turner, who owned the house that they only ever see the exterior of the house. But they'd yes, that's who he waves to in the village as he was going away.
It is over the course of the 3 years a very TARDIS-y house as well. They seem to suddenly find room to put
as
a
required
flat in that was never there.
Yes,
it does extend, And the other thing I was thinking about, and I don't know if you noticed it. Maybe it's just the sound on my thing, but there was one of the because a lot of the scenes were about the dinner table. So I think you have 3 dinners in this one, or maybe you have 2 dinners in this one. I can't remember. But one of them, there's a just dog panting all the time.
Really loudly. Yes, you just notice. I like to think it was John Nathan Turner's dog, because I know one of that was always on set.
Building up its part, love.
Yes, darling. I'm here.
Dear me.
So. The only other thing that I really had that I thought was interesting was that I saw an outtake on YouTube which was filmed during this episode when Peter Davison and Christopher Timothy dress up as superheroes, and it's a joke about it being Bill Sellers on the phone saying, do they want to do a 4th series? So anyway, I will play that in now.
Oh, good heavens, isn't somebody there?
Bill Sellers on the phone, Siegfried. Wants to know if we'll do a 4th series.
Holy television producer, Siegfried!
What shall we do?
Well, look here, super chaps, I'll tell you what. 4th series, eh? I'll talk to him on the phone. While I'm doing that, you attack from behind. All right?
Right, let's go!
Well, I enjoyed that.
It was very good.
It was amazing. What witty gentlemen they are. No.
Hey, lad.
Superman, we don't have him in round these parts.
Not round these parts.
Nee.
Nee, lad. Or lass. I would like to ask you, where do you think All Creatures Great and Small sits in terms of, is it classic BBC One drama? Is it an important drama? What do you think?
It's certainly it's at the kind of end of that decade, isn't it? The 70s, where they were just coming one after the other. It's possibly it's interesting when you think about it. It kind of runs parallel with Blake 7.
Yes.
In terms of those first 3 seasons.
Yes, it does.
It's kind of the same length of series.
Yeah.
And the same sort of 3 years, more or less, Yeah. And I presume the same budget as well.
No, indeed.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff about Blake 7 not having. It needed more budget, but it got the same as Softly Softly or something.
Yes, because it occupied that slot after Softly Softly. But of course, what the BBC does do very well is period drama. I mean, and with the amount of location work, I mean, the fact that it's outside the home counties. It's actually filming in Yorkshire. It's not pretending, that Essex is, Barnsley or whatever. Yes. It was filmed in Askrigg, is that right?
I think so. Yeah, yes. And I think there's an awful lot of, local accents, local talent. Gets used. So I think it's a very strong. I mean, it's possibly, again, I'm trying to think. Again, Blake 7 aside, it's possibly the last of those evening dramas for a while that filled that slot, because I seem to remember the early 80s went a bit away from it for a while.
Uh-huh.
I mean, obviously Tenko, but they were more midweek. It's that Sunday evening drama, isn't it? I presume it was on Sunday evening.
Because Tenko started off on a Wednesday, I think, and I think it moved to Sunday ultimately once it proved itself.
Yeah. And then, of course, it sat through. I mean, they went for however many years it was, and then the only thing they could come up with was to do more of this.
Yes.
To fill that slot, and then of course you got the other vet series, like One by One, that came later.
Yes.
But
it's interesting. It's interesting that they planned this was it. 3 series. That's it. We're done. And there was no plans at all to come back, and it was just popular demand that brought it back.
Yes, and of course you've got that thing also for most of the cast. They went off, to do other things. Although it's funny because Christopher Timothy's career didn't really take off in the same.
Yes, and then you can't argue that. Yeah, because of Peter Davison's phenomenal success in so many other things, and yet still being able to come back to All Creatures. But Christopher Timothy was just maybe so associated with James Herriot that he just didn't have that. Or is it just about the fact that Peter Davison's such a malleable actor that he does move between different parts, and you do think, well, he's different, and you think of the parts more than you do of Peter Davison. I think maybe.
It is strange. Certainly when you see how young he is, in these programs, you forget how young he was really when because he was 29 when he was announced as Doctor Who, wasn't he? Yeah. So this must be what 25, 26, and can you possibly pass as Robert Hardy's brother?
Yes, I'll try.
I can do anything. I just want the paycheck. Yeah, please. Yeah, But I mean, I don't know. Because I mean, of the cast, really, you wouldn't actually. I mean, in many ways, you wouldn't sort of pick him out as the one who was going to have the longevity of career.
No.
As a general sort of observation of the main cast, if you were putting money on it, you wouldn't necessarily think he's the guy. I mean, okay, John Nathan Turner may have had a lot to do with that, because he took him and put him into something where he was from a supporting player to the main role. But certainly for a while, he was in everything. He was the I can never remember her name, Michelle Watson, or Nick Thingamajig, Nick Berry of his.
Oh God!
Of his era, where every time a plot came along, he goes, "Can we get Peter? Can we get Peter?"
Yeah, exactly. Which leads me on, Nick Berry. Well done. You've just come to where I was going to go to, which is
another Yorkshire drama.
Is it the forerunner to Heartbeat, and can we therefore blame it for Heartbeat?
multitude of sins can be laid at the door of Mr. James Herriot.
God.
Well,
because I have an aversion to the cosy Sunday night drama, which I think developed because I think cosy and gentle suddenly became bland and dull and hideous. I don't know what you felt, but I always wouldn't watch Monarch of the Glen and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of that Sunday night drama which became so, just inane and bland.
It was trying to find something that was unchallenging. I mean, I've never done midwife,
Right.
Never. I mean, it's just not a thing I'm interested in. For about 10 years, I didn't pretty much, at that time on a Sunday evening, didn't Last of the Summer Wine fill that kind of gap.
That was earlier, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was in, that last 10 years of
Yes.
Last of the Summer Wine was that
Gentle
Sunday
comedy,
evening early,
yeah.
a bit of outdoors, so we can do something else.
Yeah. Gentle, i.e. not funny.
Well.
Harsh.
Well, I mean...
Let's hope the Summer Wine guys aren't listening.
You could argue diminishing returns.
Indeed. I think we should try and curtail our thoughts on All Creatures Great and Small so it's not as long as the episode itself.
We could go on for hours. I tell you, we've got a spin-off coming in. And we've started with letter A, so we can do an alphabet.
So shall I kick off with my closing thoughts and then I'll pass to you?
I think you may.
Okay, thank you very
much.
much.
Do I have to remember the outfits? I can't remember what any of them were wearing.
We don't have a dress for success section, don't worry, you're fine. I thought this episode was a bit all over the place. I think it had too many competing demands, and if it just concentrated on the going to war and the Polish vet and done a bit more with her, that it could have been very interesting and good. And it was good, but it could have been very good. But if you just take those scenes in which James is talking about his love letter to Yorkshire and Siegfried congratulates Tristan for passing his exams and is unable to say goodbye before he joins the RAF, all of that was super good. But the little plot lines about the animals just irritated me because I was like, I know it's what it's about.
Well, it's what people were watching for. They want,
Yes.
they want to see the cute doggy getting saved, and I mean, it's strange because all of those elements that featured as sort of subplots would, in a mid-season episode, would have probably been the major sort of strand. The Polish vet coming and would have been a whole episode in themselves. There was a lot to round up in one episode, and maybe, I mean, I'm not one to criticise poor Terence, but you do feel that maybe they threw one too many elements into the plot. I mean, you can understand why they did it, but actually, in many ways, the horse storyline wasn't necessary at all.
Not at all.
Particularly
when you got that stable boy who was beating Alexander, that was irrelevant.
Well, it was forgotten about, wasn't it?
Totally, and he was only in one scene.
Yeah, it was strange. Again, you almost get the impression that they were going to do either a feature length or a two-parter.
Yes.
And they'd sort of spliced it together, maybe because of bad weather or whatever,
Or bad writing.
But, well, I don't know. It almost feels like they were going to do 15 and they lost one. And I mean, I know there were a lot of strikes in that era. So, but I mean, there's no sort of mention anybody's ever made that All Creatures lost episodes. I mean, the season's 13, 14 episodes. I mean, they were always that. In fact, I think this one surprised me by being a 14.
Well,
I thought it was,
because 13's more normal. I mean, that's Blake 7. It's also Survivors. It's also Secret Army, apart from the last series where there was going to be 14, but then they got rid of the last episode of Secret Army.
Well, maybe they borrowed it off.
Yes! They inherited it off Secret Army. They might have done, because it's the following year.
Interconnectedness of all things, you see.
Oh, wow. What have we uncovered?
But if you were doing an episode now, a finale of a 7-year run or a 5-year run or everything like that, in many ways the last episode is often tying together lots of plot strands and giving your main cast a lot to do, because actually, apart from, I mean, it's wonderful when Tristan gets his qualification and it's beautifully underplayed, but actually in that episode Peter Davison, apart from standing in that corridor, has very little to do.
You're right.
So,
apart from fall for that goggly-eyed girl who was Sandra Dickinson knockoff.
Hence the Superman outfit, I imagine.
Yes, I think he was spending time just doing them.
I'm bored.
Yes, he was, yes. He was doing that. That's how that came about. Of course. So
but it is, I mean,
yeah.
that last scene where he stands in the street and he's looking at the sign and everything. I mean, again, you know, if you want to, for 1 second, I thought the very last close-up of the show was actually going to be Peter Davison. Just for one, I forgot because they actually run the end credits over the him in the James in the taxi.
Yeah, but I was also
the last acting, if you like, in the episode.
The last acting. I'm acting. Sorry. But the other thing that annoyed me about the ending was Carol Drinkwater again.
Out the bloody window.
She said, I won't come downstairs. What, your husband's going off to water and you're not going to go downstairs, but you will wave out the window to him like he's going off to the shops. What was that? Very strange.
And of course, again, you know, when he is waving at the people as he drives through the street, and again, you know, I feel moved by that. And, I mean, to be fair, I'm an emotional soul, but but it's so foggy.
Yes.
We've got to get these shots today. We can't take them tomorrow. It is just so bloody foggy.
And they also don't quite line up the taxi right with the waving. So, and the taxi's moving too fast for the people because they've obviously been filmed through a slower car. It just doesn't quite work for me. I was really taken out of it by that, and I don't usually worry about that sort of thing, but I did.
No,
I must just say it's really good that we had Christopher Timothy with his top off. I mean, because I thought, well, if we're doing Creatures Great and Small, we have to do an episode where he's got his top off.
It is very much. This is the greatest hits episode.
Yes. Although I was disappointed that his arm was not up the cow's backside.
No, he said, I'm not doing that again. You can have the angle, but you're not having the reverse.
Exactly.
I'll stand in the cowshed with my shirt off for the ladies.
Yes. Exactly.
And obviously the lady vet's not doing that.
No, at least only in Tristan's imagination.
That's one for the Christmas VT tape, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, Martin, I've really enjoyed going back to 1980 and 1930s Darrowby.
Aye.
All right. Aye, lad.
Aye. And Ted Malt.
Ted Malt. Mrs. All. Mrs. All.
Not having to drop his feather in front of glass.
No, lad. Bye, lad. No.
So I was quite surprised to see Ted Malt walk out of that stable. Bloody hell! He just double glazed it, or what?
Okay. Until we meet again.
Indeed. Well, like I say, all creatures great and small begins with A. We can do letter B.
That's a really good idea. Andy and Martin's A to Z of TV. Love it.
No, I just think we now at least ruined the end of series 3 for everybody.
Yes.
But there are 4 more series,
Well
including
done us.
the Callum Buchanan.
Oh yes.
An interesting introduction. And a couple of Christmas specials. So you know, we've kind of ruined the first half.
Yeah. But go and hoover up the rest now, and you get a bit of Linda Bellingham in for your money as well. So well done.
Indeed. It's another one of those massive box sets that takes some trawling through, but I think it's worth the journey.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers then.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Many thanks to Martin and to Andy.
Yes, that's a very huge article.
But I think they've worked really well together,
Yes.
and I'm glad we were able to facilitate their meeting over the waves.
And that might not be the last you hear from them.
I hope they can do more like that. Indeed. Now, Paul and Nick have a look at a Screen 2 production, which is
Hotel du Lac.
My dearest David, a cold coming I had of it. Penelope drove me to the airport as if escorting some prisoner to the maximum security wing. No doubt I shall be allowed back eventually to resume my peaceable existence. But for the time being, I must serve out my exile in this decorous hotel, which now, at the very end of the season, exudes an air of deadly calm.
Hello, Round the Archives people. It's me, Paul Chandler, Paul Shagety, whatever you want to call me. I'm here with Nick.
Hello.
Hello, Nick Goodman. That sounds like I said, hello, Nick Goodman. we only ever respond to each other as, hello, Paul Chandler. Would you like a cup of tea, Paul Chandler?
Yes, thank you, Paul Chandler.
So, yes, we're skating the sort of boundaries of what we are allowed to discuss on Round the Archives. By this time, we're talking about a film, and we're going to do in a way that we do when we watch like a TV programme. We're going to sort of pause halfway through and then...
Is it made for TV?
Well, that's why we're allowed to do it, because it's actually an episode of the BBC Screen 2 series. So although it's only about 75 minutes,
Effectively, it's like a play for today, I guess.
It is, except that it's filmed in a beautiful location with a really good cast. What we are talking about is Hotel du Lac.
Yeah.
It's the television version of a Booker Prize-winning novel by Anita Bruckner. It's got a really good cast: Anna Massey, Denham Elliott, music by Carl Davis. So the synopsis, sort of Hotel du Lac is a romance novelist who is staying in a Swiss hotel meets other English visitors, including Mrs. Pusey, Mrs. Pusey's daughter Jennifer, and an attractive middle-aged man, Mr. Neville. But then you kind of get flashbacks, and I won't say any more now. We'll come back halfway through and see what you think, because I'm sure you'll be recognising all the actors. It was aired on the 2nd of March 1986.
I remember that day. I had a good snowball fight. Snowing.
I have a feeling that somebody sent me the Radio Times clipping of when it was shown, and it was shown sort of like at 10 o'clock at night, which I think...
It's a Sunday.
It's on a Sunday, yes. On a Sunday. I was thinking, 10 o'clock on BBC Two, on a Sunday night. You're not selling it to people.
No.
How many people, you wouldn't necessarily have had not that many people would have had video recorders in 86. Bad scheduling, but there we go.
But yes.
I watched this the other day, and I thought, yes, I want to share this with Round the Archives. It's a bit different from what you and I have done before, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
If only, as much for the actors as the story. So let's get started, and we'll talk again. We'll be back.
We'll be back. Here we go.
I can't help thinking one ought to be at home at this slowly darkening time of the year. And so I would be, had I not committed that apparently dreadful crime.
So, Nick, we're kind of a little bit over halfway.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's as I say, it's very different fare for us. It's beautifully made. Amazing cast. There's a scene where Denham Elliott is sat with Anna Massey, and I think I might have seen it because it's almost identical to. So I wrote a Life After story, which I envisaged. There's a Colonel character in it, which I envisaged played by Denham Elliott, and the planet on it is just like Switzerland. It's, it's sort of very hilly, and so I'm wondering if I might have caught a glimpse of it. I don't think I saw it all, but certainly that bit with Denham Elliott rings a bell. It's more than just a coincidence. It's very nicely made. We've got science fiction fans among sure. There's Geoffrey Wickham from the 5th Sapphire and Steel story, and Anna Massey looking very nice. She was a good-looking woman. One forgets. Julie Mackenzie looking gorgeous. I've already said on the podcast that I like Julie Mackenzie. She really is looking pretty. I don't think she's uttered a single line yet.
No, it's in the commentary. They were saying how grateful they were because the part didn't have many. It was all sort of physical acting and sort of little giggles and things. Yeah. And they were so pleased
and
that
she pulls it off really well because she was a very established actress.
Yeah, and they said that they were really pleased that she was willing to go all the way over there for that role. And I think equally so Irene Handel. I think they would.
Yes.
This is something they were hoping to maybe find a way of doing it so she didn't have to travel, and she made it quite clear that she wanted to travel.
How you miss actors like Irene Handel and Julia and Anna Massey and Denham Elliott really give it gravitas.
Because I think one of the reasons I like it is that it appeals to my in the nicest possible way, voyeuristic sort of sitting somewhere watching people watching.
Yeah, people watching. People watching is a great thing. I mean, even going back to the video that I bought this morning, I encountered a complete stranger, and kind of it was sort of we were sizing each other up a bit. It's a sort of I tried to envisage in my head a picture of what the kind of person that she was.
Exactly what the Anna Massey's character does.
Yeah.
And she's come to Switzerland because we don't want to give the plot away, but she's sort of been disgraced in her peer group, and they sort of said, well, just go away for a long holiday, and when you come back, people would have forgotten about it.
I have to say, with respect to that, the chronology of it is a wee bit difficult to follow.
It took me a while. It took me a while because it's very. It's not. I don't know how you should. I don't know how best to do it, because if you have a little tinkling sort of dream sequence, or you have but there must be ways of doing. And I think the first time I watched, I was like, okay, so they're back in London. This must be a flashback.
I wasn't entirely sure we'd gone back. I didn't realise we'd gone back.
The flashbacks are once you realise the Barry Foster character is only in the flashbacks, and that the whole London stuff is all flashback. It's fine, but it took me a moment or two to kind of go, why is she standing on a rooftop? That's not Switzerland anymore.
Yeah. But again, it was great to see Barry Foster, who is also a great actor. So far, his characters confused me a little bit, but no doubt it'll sort of glue together. But it's a very, very nice production.
I say, I don't want that man round me anymore. Would you mind awfully coming and sitting with me?
Not with Elmar Pusey today, then.
I didn't feel quite up to her this early in the morning.
I can't stand the sight of her myself. Of course, Sunday's the one day they can't swan around buying knickers. Oh, I do beg your pardon. Lingerie. Not that I'd put it past her to bang up some wretched little shopkeeper on a Sunday simply because she happened to have a spare few thousand francs.
I do seem to do a great deal of shopping.
Aren't you supposed to be a writer? And aren't writers supposed to be good at observing human nature? I only ask because you sometimes strike me as being a bit thick.
I'm sorry.
And I've started reading the novel, which a lot of Anita Buchner's. I decided I'd probably read a few of hers, and they're quite inexpensive, and most of them are only about 200 something pages, so they're quite quick to get through. And I started reading Hotel du Lac, and the whole first scene where she's sitting, sort of sizing up the characters and wondering who they are. The little monologue you hear, that's almost word for word. I think when I listened to the commentary, the producers sort of said it was, the book was so you didn't need to change that much. It was sort of so easy to
Going back to Irene Handler, what's very clever is she's playing. There's comedy in her character, but yet she's playing it dead straight. She's almost a tragic character. Well, she is a tragic character.
She's been left. She's quite rich, but she's been left by her sort of children have taken over her nice house, and she's sort of stuck in this hotel. And
she's not having to reach for it. She is that great, and the sort of the resentment about everybody else having a good time, and it really. I mean, I think this was one of her final roles. She actually died the following year, but amazing.
There's a great scene where she's eating spaghetti and it's just hanging out of her mouth.
Exactly.
And she gets a pair of nail scissors and trims the spaghetti.
Again, it's totally she's not actually playing it for laughs.
It makes you laugh.
Very clever performance. A very different kind of thing for her. You would have thought. I don't know who.
It's not.
When you picked up the script, you would. I mean, there was plenty of grande dame actresses still around there in those days, but you wouldn't have. You may not have automatically thought of Irene Handler when you opened the script. But that was a nice cast against type, I think. It's nice to see her in a straight role, which has humour in it.
Well, let's go on to the last bit of the film, and then we'll sum up at the end.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes, here I am.
And there's a couple of English women, obviously mother and daughter, say late 50s and mid-20s. Very grand and self-assured.
Today, s'il vous plaît, pour ma fille et quelqu'un de vos jolis gâteaux. I told Jennifer to ask you to join us. I can't bear to see anyone on their own.
Oh, well,
I said to Jennifer, she has such sad eyes, I said. Is this your first visit to the hotel?
It is, yes.
We've been coming here every year for I don't know how long, haven't we, my darling? We're absolutely devoted to
Well, we've reached the end. And what did you think?
Sorry, I'm quite tired. Very enjoyable. Lovely little production. Beautifully shot. You were commenting on the weather, weren't you?
Yeah.
It just totally pitch perfect.
I wondered whether they saw it was a foggy day coming up, so they deliberately waited to film the more sort of sombre scenes at the end,
and a soft focus.
Whether it was a lucky coincidence.
Lovely sort of scenes of soft focus, and just. But I forgot to mention Patricia Hodge playing a wonderfully obnoxious character. She's just pitch perfect in those sort of roles. I have to say, we won't comment about the end, obviously, if you want to go and see it, but I have to say, at the end, I kind of think Animasi's character was going to do something, and I just thought, no! And
but then she undid it.
Then she
undid it in the last few.
Yes,
minutes,
exactly. That's all we're going to say.
Although who knows whether that will lead to? I don't think either way was exactly ideal. But
no, she was a woman who didn't really know kind of
where her life was
where her life was going, what to do, whether to
and a successful
take
woman.
A lover, get married, and that's what life is all about, really. Isn't it?
It was good because she was a successful novelist.
Yeah.
She was a successful woman, but she
made a nice piercing observation about prospecting women, who only kind of go after blokes with wealth, and she said that that's much more of a far more worthy, they're dishonourable and far more worthy target than for feminists, and it's perfectly true, really. I mean, they should have more self-respect, but there you go. It's again, Massey, Elliot. I mean, all classy stuff. It's they know a thing. They knew a thing or two. That's the thing. I think of the main supporting cast, I think we've only got Julia Mackenzie and dear old Jeffrey Cater, who frightfully man from the ministry, who turns up and everything. He's nearly 100. I think he's actually still alive. Everybody else is gone.
Yes.
And they never called me mother.
It makes me want to go and sit in a posh hotel.
Yeah. Two observations about Carl Davis. His score. There were several times I thought he was going to break into the Deer Hunter.
There was a couple of times I thought he was going to break into sort of incidental music of Davison Doctor Who.
Yes. The other thing was there's a scene leading to a wedding. I won't say what's going to happen in it, but as the car goes away, there's a sort of triumphant theme, and there are strains of one of my favourite pieces of music, Zadok the Priest, which is the gradual one, the coronation one that goes on and on and on and on and on. Which I actually it's on my phone. I use it as a wake up alarm, and very effective it is too because it builds and builds and builds into it. But yeah, I know that was quite clever the way they reference that. But yeah, Julia Mackenzie, I think we were saying, it's amazing. She's a very, very established actress by then, and she is playing this kind of a form of rather silly daughter who kind of.
There's only one scene because she's always all over her mother and everything. But there's one scene where she's turned into a big drama, where actually she sort of, she probably had what was going to be a quite fun moment spoilt by her mother's overreaction to the fact that they live in each other's pockets.
Yes, a ghastly existence. Actually, I love my mum to bits, but I couldn't have lived in her shadow, and she wouldn't have wanted it. So, but no, very neat little story.
I was just thinking how little vice there is around these days.
You should get rid of that cardigan. Whoever told you you looked like Virginia Woolf did you a grave disservice. As to vice, there's plenty around if you know where to look.
Obviously I don't. I certainly never find any.
You don't try hard enough. Anyway, didn't we say we were going to change all that?
If all it involves is giving away my cardigan, I feel I should tell you I have another one at home. I suppose I could give that away as well, but I feel I'm too spiritless for radical gestures. I'm just not fascinating.
No. One sees that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was very much, if it hadn't been adapted from a book, it could almost have been a very posh play for today. Because that sort of, and you get that caliber cast, but obviously the production values are as far in advance of most play for today. But no, it was good.
Well, thank you very much for watching with me, and thank you, listeners, for listening to Nick and I discuss Hotel du Lac, and we'll pass you back now to Andrew and Lisa.
The BBC Studios.
The BBC Studios.
And the message is, coming home. No, sorry, that's wrong. Just put, returning.
Thank you to Paul and Nick
Yes.
for doing that.
Yes, indeed.
And Paul's already planning the
Ahead.
next piece.
Yes.
I've seen a list.
Yeah, and the one after that, and the one after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting organised.
Oh, yeah.
Putting
Except us.
Putting us to shame.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just sort of make it up as we go along.
Indeed. And to prove that, as we said, Warren will now join us for a general chat about the BBC. And then that'll be the end of the episode.
It will.
But we'll say thank you at the end of the piece.
Yes.
So here we go.
Hello, Warren. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Andrew. Just an extra piece at the
Hello,
end.
Andrew.
I know you like an extra piece.
I like a large portion at the end.
You do. I just thought we'd like to, as this has been a BBC special,
Yes.
what has the BBC ever done for us?
Well, it got us together to start with.
Yeah.
Because of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. We're all sitting on the sofa because of the BBC.
Yes, because of
Do you
Doctor
think?
Who.
Warren?
They've all made...
what were you sucking on there,
I was
Warren?
sucking on the end of me,
Of your spectacles.
My spectacles, yes. It's given us a fantastic childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's given us an imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's given us the ability, in some cases, to take that imagination and put it onto paper for other people to appreciate.
Okay, that's good.
It's given us bankruptcy.
You what, sorry?
Bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy. Oh,
Because
gosh.
of all the DVDs.
If I buy any more DVDs, and if I keep moving home, all my boxes are full of DVDs now. That's all I ever seem to move, and I've got 3 large cupboards full of DVDs at the moment.
How much money do you think between us we've spent on the BBC?
Probably enough to put a good deposit on a house.
Yeah, I've estimated I've got just under probably about £16,000 worth of DVDs.
Yeah. Wow.
And other merchandise. It's easy that. But yourselves,
Yeah.
you have your own archive. You have the most amazing archive there is.
Well, it's still not complete.
No.
There's still. Well, that's the thing. There's still a lot of BBC stuff we don't have.
Absolutely, and we keep discovering new programs.
Yeah.
May I ask you, do you ever say I've got nothing to watch?
Yes. Yeah. Or you take so long to decide what to watch by the time you've decided there's no time to watch it.
Or you can't remember where you put that particular DVD.
Oh, we were always doing that.
Yeah.
Always doing that.
So, the BBC, it is a core of our understanding. It is something that we have grown up with. Okay, we've grown up with ITV, and then we've had bolt-ons like your Channel 4s, your Channel 5s, your satellites, and taking that out of context, international television, if you like, because BBC is truly international, because you look at what happened in the 70s, in the 50s and the 60s, we start bringing Eurovision to this country.
Yeah.
Then Je Sans Frontières in the 70s. So it does widen your aspect of other television companies, but you always come back to what you're happy with and what is your core, and the BBC is your core, isn't it?
Was Television Centre an important symbol for the BBC, do you think, now that it is no more?
I mean, it is there now, but not in quite the same capacity.
Because I remember as a kid watching things like Blue Peter or Swap Shop, where they'd tour round BBC Television Centre and see what else was in studio that day. And I find that fascinating, that it really was a place of magic, wasn't it?
Okay, then, if I showed you two pictures now,
Yeah.
one being Alexandra Palace,
Yeah.
and one being BBC Television Centre,
Yeah.
which one screams BBC to you?
TV Centre for me still.
Do you think that's a generational thing?
I
Will
think
be
it is,
yourself,
yeah.
Lisa?
Yes, probably.
Because I think we take Lime Grove out of that. People will go, well, what about Lime Grove and Ealing? Well, Ealing had a separate life, and so did Lime Grove in their previous occupations. And they're not big, iconic buildings associated with the BBC.
But I remember things like record breakers,
And the tap dancing.
dancing around
Yes.
the fountain and things like that. And of course, you'd get the Blue Peter Garden as well, with Percy Thrower and the
They're
statue,
just vandals,
and the statue of Petra and all
Yes.
of that. It was more than just a place where programmes were made. It did feel like it was itself a star of shows sometimes.
Very much so. I mean, you have things like Python always seem to satirise the organisation itself, that it was entirely reliant upon putting it on its screens.
Yeah, because there's even that clip from Square World where it gets launched into space.
Yes.
And you can see Steptoe with the horse and car.
Yeah.
And to me, I love this idea that it was all part of a whole, that you could actually go there. Did you ever go there?
No. Yes. No, I did. I did when I worked in London. I did a delivery there.
All right. Yeah.
I did a delivery there, and I delivered some double glazed units. But we went on the outer ring road inside.
Yeah.
Never went anywhere inside the building.
Yeah.
Even then, you're driving around the back of studios, and it's fascinating.
What about you, Lisa?
No, I never got to go to the.
Because we'd go past it on the train, but that's about it. No, but lots of people did go and visit, sort of, Doctor Who fans especially did go and visit sort of studio recordings. So BBC departments, what do they mean to you? Radiophonic workshop, special effects, costume, design.
There's going to be a bang. That's the first thing I think of when I think of special effects. Michael John Harris
making something blow up. Yeah.
Quite sort of pathetically.
And then somebody in the background going, "Whoa!" But that's the thing. You see all these names go up at the end of BBC programmes in the days that you could actually read the credits.
Go too fast.
And to us, they're all real people, aren't they? All sort of people that work at the Beeb.
Yeah.
And you've got a little image in your head of all of these people, haven't you? Like, if I said Douglas Camfield, there's an image in your head straight away. Ray Cusick, as you said, Michael John Harris, Clive Doig.
Yes.
Elwyn Jones. I mean, you've discovered a lot of Elwyn Jones stuff recently, haven't you,
Yeah.
Warren? You've been sort of working, and once upon a time, that was just a name on the opening credits of the Highlanders to you, wasn't it? It didn't
absolutely.
But then you find out he did Softly, and he did
and where that spawned
books
off,
and things,
and where it spawned off from there.
And I said to you about credits, Lisa, that I think it is true that an organisation demonstrates what it thinks of its employees by how much it gives them credit at the end of something. And if you can't read the end credits, I always think that's a bit insulting. So, yeah, I like credits.
I think the BBC personifies the fact that you can have a world within the world. The world doesn't need to be contained on a different planet.
Yeah.
The BBC Television Centre is a world away from reality because it creates make-believe.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have got a world within a world. And within that world is another world. So the BBC is immortal to a certain extent. And it's entirely within the imagination of the person watching this box in the corner to be able to reach out and go, do you know what, I'm being part of this world that's not reality, but I'm happy to watch something that is within something else. So it's a box within a box within a box within a box.
Lots of boxes. I should say also a thank you to BBC services that I think most people aren't even aware exist. Because so much of Round the Archives is done with information that is searchable from places like BBC Genome.
Yeah.
And they don't have to do this.
No.
But I can look up any day and date and year and find out what the schedule was for that night.
Yeah.
And that gives me such a perspective on where shows fit in the wider scheme of things. I mean, we accessed BBC Archives to do all the Great Egg Race stuff.
We did, yeah.
But it's hidden away, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who other than yourselves do you think uses that as other than a particular group of people uses that, would you say?
I bet if you talk to most people,
I don't know what it is.
They wouldn't even know.
No.
Because I've seen people arguing about these services and people just don't know.
And it's quite a compliment to the BBC for them to be bold enough to put that out as well, because they know it's going to be only a niche, isn't it?
Well, I think honestly there might be a lack of knowledge of the BBC's own history at sort of management level these days, and that does worry me, that people who work for the BBC don't know its history, and you can't argue in favour of something if you don't know its history, can you?
Yeah, Russell T Davies, Director General.
Yeah, so
he knows.
It's interesting that Doctor Who fans grew up and eventually worked on the show, but is that true in a wider sense at the BBC? How many people working high up at the BBC are fans of the BBC? Is it just a job for them? Or, if we said the Gnomes of Dulwich to them, would they even have heard of it? That's the thing. And I do wonder about that. So I would say to the BBC, learn more about your history and promote it more.
Yes, I'm afraid they fall into the corporate envelope a lot, don't they?
Yeah, because Dennis Potter, for example, was a huge fan of television.
Yes.
And you
he knew how it worked.
And you want people arguing in favour of the BBC who are huge fans of television and the BBC itself. And if we can occasionally educate people about the BBC's own history, I'd love for Round the Archives to be sort of on a BBC training course. Go away and listen to this and learn a bit about your own history.
And this is how much the organisation can trigger passions within people.
Because we said how big an influence the BBC has been on us, and I don't think a lot of people just realise how much it has been, because their lives would have been very different.
It's part of their cultural society, isn't it? Part of cultural society, and it's you go back to the late 20s when we had the early 30s, beginning of the BBC radio.
Yeah.
We don't go that. We know very little about that. That's very little the wireless service is spoken about.
Yeah, we could go on about BBC radio comedy for ages. That's the thing.
And also, I think the existence of the BBC makes ITV be better.
Yeah,
it makes it think, well, we need to do better quality dramas. Not so much the light entertainment, but they need to make sure their dramas are as good as the BBC's and Sky's to a certain extent. If the BBC wasn't there, they wouldn't have to try so hard.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, anything else you want to say?
Well, I would quite happily pay the licence fee for Doctor and the Clangers alone.
I was about to say, are we falling into a not the 9 o'clock news sketch here? I would quite happily sell my house for the price of the...
Yes, so just for those two things.
Yeah.
Even though you pay the licence fee, but
I was going to say, go on then. Yes.
I would encourage you to pay the licence fee for those two things.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And thank you to everyone who's helped with episode 46.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it wasn't necessarily planned as a BBC special, but things came in, and I think we were able to sort of tie them up together.
Yes.
Episode 47 will be along in due course. Again, I've got some ideas about that, but for the moment, we'll say thank you and see you again. Bye-bye!
Bye!
That was episode 46 of Round the Archives.
Starring Lisa Parker, Andrew Trowbridge, Warren Cummings, Simon Exton, Ken Moss, Martin Holmes, Andy Priestner, Paul Chandler and Nick Goodman.
On the musical side, you heard Dan Tate and Paul Chandler.
The script for All Creatures Great and Small, Big Steps and Little Uns was by Terence Dudley.
And the producer was Bill Sellers.
And there's your first look at the BBC One clock this decade, 2 hours of which have now elapsed. At which point, may I now wish you a very happy new year, particularly if I'm the first to do so. Thoughts echoed, I know, by all of those working tonight to bring a smooth and professional end to BBC One at the turn of the year. The sartorial elegance on the other side of the glass is something to behold, with DJs and ball gowns aplenty. Who's wearing what you'll have to work out for yourselves. But there's Paul Tarlin, our engineer, ensuring perfect sound and vision. Sarah Rhodes, keeping our colleagues throughout Britain informed of our intentions, even if we don't abide by them. Robin Fletcher, in charge of scripts, timings and visuals. Pressing the thousands of buttons with panache, Louise Bresler. And keeping us all in order, director Nikki Don't Panic James. She's even got the power to fade me, Rent-A-Mouth Miles, into oblivion. But not before I've reminded you that Radio 2 is now offering music and chat from Ellis Hill, while on Radio 4's long-wave frequency you'll find the BBC World Service broadcasting through to the early morning. From all of us, though, once again, a happy new year to you and a peaceful night. Good night.